I can still remember the sound of her voice, calm yet sharp, like the edge of a knife gliding over my skin before pressing in deep. "I don't have to make you happy." Lorraine said it so casually, so effortlessly, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. She didn't yell. She didn't hesitate. She just stood there, her arms crossed, waiting for me to accept it. For a few seconds, I actually thought I misheard her. Surely, she didn't mean that, right? Maybe she was frustrated. Maybe it was just one of those flippant remarks that came out wrong. But as I stood in our dimly lit kitchen, staring at her across the counter, I saw something in her face that made my stomach turn. She meant it. That's when it hit me. She had already stopped caring. I felt my mouth go dry. The words were there, burning at the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't force them out. How was I supposed to respond to that? To the woman I loved telling me, straight to my face, that my happiness was irrelevant to her? My first instinct was to argue, to fight for what we had, to remind her of all the moments when I had put her first, when I had done everything in my power to make her happy. But something deep inside me told me it wouldn't matter. Because this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. This was how she truly felt. It wasn't like we were in the middle of a fight. There was no screaming, no tension in the air before those words slipped out. It was just another evening, just another conversation that I had assumed was normal. But now, looking at her, I realized that normal had been slipping away for a long time. Had I been blind? Had I just refused to see it? My mind raced through the past months, maybe even years, searching for clues I had ignored. The way she stopped asking about my day. The way she scrolled through her phone at dinner while I talked. The way her eyes barely flickered with interest when I shared something important to me. All the signs had been there, hadn't they? I just hadn't wanted to believe them. For years, I had poured everything into our marriage. I made sacrifices, put her first, did everything I could to make her happy. I worked long hours to make sure we had a good life. I planned trips she wanted to go on, cooked meals she liked, bought gifts just to see her smile. I always thought that's what love was, giving, even when it was hard. But now, as I stood in that kitchen, my hands resting against the cold countertop, I realized something. It had never been mutual. I was the one doing all the work. I was the one carrying the weight of our relationship. And the worst part? She didn't even feel guilty about it. "I don't have to make you happy." She didn't even flinch when she said it. A strange sensation crept into my chest, something between heartbreak and clarity. Maybe this was the moment I was supposed to wake up. I didn't say anything. I just nodded slowly, staring at the woman I had spent years loving, and let those words settle deep inside me. If she didn't feel responsible for my happiness, why had I spent so long making hers my priority? A new thought entered my mind. A dangerous thought. One that had never crossed my mind before. What if I stopped? What if, for once, I stopped being the one who cared more? What if I showed her what life looked like when her happiness no longer mattered to me either? She didn't notice the shift in my expression. She didn't notice the way my hands clenched just a little tighter against the counter. Maybe she thought I would argue. Maybe she thought I would beg. But I just took a deep breath, pushed off the counter, and walked away. For the first time in years, I didn't chase after her. And that was the moment everything changed. I barely slept that night. Not because I was angry, not yet, but because I couldn't stop replaying that moment in my head. Over and over, I heard Lorraine's voice, detached and certain. "I don't have to make you happy." The words settled into my bones like lead. It was as if she had unknowingly handed me a key, unlocking a door I had been too afraid to open for years. Lying there in bed, staring at the ceiling while she scrolled through her phone beside me, I felt something shift inside me. I had spent years bending over backward for her, prioritizing her needs, ensuring her comfort, believing that if I just kept showing love, eventually, she'd give some of it back. But this was my wake-up call. For the first time in a long time, I wondered, what if I stopped? What if I stopped trying to make things work, stopped bending, stopped sacrificing? What would happen if I simply let go? The next morning, I didn't follow my usual routine. Normally, I'd wake up first, brew her favorite coffee just the way she liked it, 2 sugars, a dash of vanilla creamer, and bring it to her in bed. I'd kiss her forehead, tell her good morning, and wait for that absent-minded nod while she kept her eyes on her phone. But this time, I stayed in bed. I let the alarm blare until she groaned and slapped it off herself. I heard her shuffle out of bed, expecting to find her coffee waiting. When she came back into the room, empty-handed, she gave me a puzzled look. "You forgot my coffee," she said, more like a statement than a complaint. I stretched, faking a yawn. "Guess I did." She blinked, as if my response didn't compute. I had been so consistent, so predictable in my efforts to please her, that the slightest deviation threw her off balance. I could tell she was waiting for me to get up and fix my mistake, but I just laid there, letting the silence stretch between us. After a long pause, she scoffed under her breath and left the room. I listened as she shuffled around the kitchen, making her own coffee, slamming the cabinet doors a little harder than necessary. And that was when I knew I had been right. She had taken everything I did for granted. It wasn't just about the coffee. It was about everything. The way I planned our date nights. The way I picked up groceries without her asking. The way I always made sure her car had gas. How I left little notes for her when I knew she'd have a long day. How I instinctively filled in the gaps where she refused to meet me halfway. I had been the glue holding us together, and she hadn't even noticed. Well, not anymore. At work, I found myself more focused than I had been in months. Without the weight of my marriage draining me, I threw myself into my projects. My coworkers noticed. "You seem different today," one of them commented, and I realized that, yeah, I did feel different. For so long, I had been carrying a burden I wasn't meant to bear alone. But now that I had decided to put it down, I felt lighter. That evening, I walked into the house without my usual rush to greet Lorraine. Normally, I'd ask about her day, give her my full attention while she complained about work or traffic or her latest annoyance. But today, I simply nodded at her from across the room and sat down on the couch, flipping through the TV channels like she wasn't even there. At first, she ignored me. But after a few minutes, I felt her gaze flick toward me. She was waiting for me to ask, waiting for me to care. I didn't. "So, you're not going to ask about my day?" she finally said. I shrugged. "Figured you'd tell me if you wanted to." She frowned. "I always tell you." I smirked. "Yeah, and I always ask." The confusion on her face was almost amusing. I had always been predictable, always played the role of the doting husband, the one who cared enough for both of us. But now? Now she was starting to realize that the man she had taken for granted wasn't there anymore. And I could tell it bothered her. She crossed her arms. "Are you mad about something?" I looked at her, really looked at her. She had never asked me that before, not in all the times I had been upset, drained, or hurt. It was only now, when my behavior no longer served her, that she even noticed something was wrong. I chuckled under my breath. "Nope. Then why are you acting weird?" I tilted my head. "I don't think I am." She huffed, clearly irritated, but when she realized she wasn't getting the reaction she wanted, she gave up. Instead, she grabbed her phone and curled up on the opposite side of the couch, scrolling through social media like I wasn't even there. And for the first time in years, I felt absolutely nothing about it. I was done chasing her. Done proving my worth to a woman who had already decided she didn't need to make me happy. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just free. That night, as I laid in bed beside her, I felt her shift closer, like she was testing the waters. Maybe she was starting to notice the absence of something she had once taken for granted. But I didn't move. I didn't pull her close like I used to. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The change wasn't immediate, but I felt it growing, like a quiet storm building in the distance. It wasn't just about the coffee or the conversations I no longer initiated. It was deeper than that. Something inside me had cracked open, and no matter how much Lorraine might have expected me to slip back into my old patterns, I had no intention of doing so. A few days passed, and I kept my distance, letting her sit in the silence she had created. It was strange how much space there suddenly was between us. I hadn't realized how much of my energy had been spent filling the gaps, asking the questions, making the plans, ensuring that she felt loved. Now that I wasn't doing those things, the emptiness between us became impossible to ignore. And Lorraine? At first, she seemed fine. Almost indifferent, as if she barely noticed. But I knew better. The signs were subtle. How she lingered in rooms she normally breezed through. How her eyes flickered toward me when she thought I wasn't looking. How she hesitated before speaking, as if waiting for me to prompt her like I always had. But I didn't. I let her feel it. One night, we sat at opposite ends of the couch. She scrolled on her phone while the TV droned on, but she wasn't really watching it. Neither was I. Finally, she broke the silence. "You've been weird lately." I didn't look at her. "Yeah." She shifted, clearly uncomfortable with my lack of engagement. "Yeah, you don't talk to me like you used to." I almost laughed at the irony. Maybe I got tired of talking to someone who wasn't listening. She exhaled sharply, like I had struck a nerve. "That's not fair." I turned to her, finally meeting her gaze. "Isn't it?" For a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. But she buried it quickly. I don't know what you want from me. That was the moment I knew she truly didn't get it. All these years, I had been giving, giving, without ever asking for anything in return. And now that I had stopped, she was confused. Not because she missed me, not because she suddenly cared, but because the rhythm she had grown so used to was disrupted. I let out a breath, shaking my head. I don't want anything from you, Lorraine. Her brows furrowed. Then why are you acting like this? I leaned back, letting my arm rest over the couch. Like what? Like you don't care. I studied her for a moment, letting the weight of her own words settle. Maybe I don't. Her jaw tightened, and she looked away, but I saw it, the moment my words hit her. And yet, she still didn't apologize. She still didn't ask how I felt, or what had led me here. She just sat there, chewing on her bottom lip, as if trying to figure out how to get things back to the way they were. But they weren't going back. The next morning, I left early. Normally, I'd kiss her on the forehead before I left for work. This time, I didn't. I grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and didn't look back. And for the first time in years, I felt nothing. Nothing but relief. Days turned into weeks, and the silence in our home became deafening. It wasn't an explosive kind of silence, not the kind that comes after a heated fight, thick with tension and unsaid words. No, this was something worse. This was the silence of two people who had stopped trying. And the thing was, I didn't mind it. For years, I had carried the weight of our marriage on my shoulders, bending over backward to keep Lorraine happy, thinking that if I just tried a little harder, if I gave a little more, maybe one day she would do the same for me. But that day never came. Instead, she had stood in front of me, without a hint of remorse, and told me outright that my happiness wasn't her concern. So, I stopped making her mine. It was strange at first, unlearning the habits I had built for so long. I no longer rushed home from work to spend time with her, no longer asked about her day, or made sure her favorite snacks were stocked in the pantry. I stopped planning date nights she barely acknowledged, stopped giving compliments she never returned, stopped reaching for her at night when she felt like a ghost beside me. And Lorraine noticed. At first, she acted like she didn't care. She still went about her days as usual, scrolling through her phone at dinner, half listening when I spoke. But there was something different in the way she carried herself now. A hesitation, a stiffness in her posture whenever she realized I wasn't watching her anymore. One evening, I came home late, something I never used to do. I had gone out for drinks with a few coworkers, something I had always turned down before because I wanted to be home with my wife. But now, sitting in a noisy bar surrounded by laughter and conversation that didn't drain me, I realized just how much I had been missing. By the time I walked through the front door, it was nearly 10. Lorraine was on the couch, curled up in a blanket, the TV playing in the background. She looked up when she heard me come in, her brows knitting together in confusion. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice carrying an edge of something I couldn't quite place. I shrugged as I set my keys down. "Out with friends." Her lips parted slightly, like she had expected a different answer. For years, she had been used to me being predictable, reliable. The man who was always home, always available, always putting her first. But now, she wasn't so sure. "Why didn't you tell me?" she pressed, her voice quieter this time. I turned to look at her, really look at her. "I didn't think you'd care." For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes, something that looked a lot like regret. But just as quickly as it appeared, she buried it. Instead, she scoffed, crossing her arms. "Don't be dramatic." I chuckled under my breath. "Right. Because I'm the dramatic one." I walked past her without another word, heading to the bedroom. I could feel her watching me, waiting for me to say something else, to reassure her, to give her something to hold on to. But I didn't. She had already made it clear. I wasn't her responsibility. So I let her sit in the emptiness she had created. That night, for the first time in our marriage, I slept soundly. And I knew, deep in my gut, that things were only going to get worse from here. The first real sign of trouble came on a Sunday morning. It had been nearly a month since I had made the decision to stop prioritizing Lorraine's happiness. In that time, I had done something I never thought I'd do. I focused on myself. It wasn't an act of revenge. I wasn't trying to make her jealous or punish her. I simply realized that if my happiness didn't matter to her, then maybe hers shouldn't matter to me either. I started going to the gym more often, not because she ever commented on my appearance, but but because I wanted to feel better about myself. I stopped checking in with her throughout the day, no longer sending her messages asking how she was doing or if she needed anything. When I made dinner, I made what I wanted, not just what I knew she liked. And most importantly, I started saying no. No to last-minute plans that disrupted my schedule. No to running errands for her while she sat on the couch scrolling through her phone. No to dropping everything the second she snapped her fingers. And Lorraine? She didn't know how to handle it. That Sunday, I woke up early. The sun was barely up, and instead of lying in bed like I used to, waiting for her to stir, I got dressed and headed out for a morning run. The air was crisp, the streets were empty, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. By the time I got back home, Lorraine was in the kitchen, still in her pajamas, staring at her phone while absent-mindedly stirring her coffee. I walked past her, grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, and leaned against the counter, cooling off. She didn't look up at first, but I could feel the tension radiating from her. "Where were you?" she finally asked, her voice casual, too casual. "Running," I replied, taking a sip of water. She frowned slightly, setting her phone down. "Since when do you run in the mornings?" I shrugged. "Started last week." That seemed to bother her. Not the running itself, but the fact that I had changed something in my routine without her knowing. "Would have been nice if you told me." I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "I didn't think you cared about what I do." That shut her up real fast. She pressed her lips together, shifting in her seat. I just thought she cut herself off, shaking her head. "Never mind." And just like that, she went back to scrolling on her phone, acting like she wasn't affected. But I saw through it. She was realizing something. For years, I had been predictable. She knew exactly where I was, what I was doing, and more importantly, who I was doing it for. Every decision I made had, in some way, revolved around her. But not anymore. And that was something she wasn't prepared for. The shift in her behavior. That afternoon, we were supposed to go to a family gathering at her sister's house. I say supposed to because Lorraine had told me about it weeks ago, but never actually asked if I wanted to go. She just assumed, like always, that I would. And in the past, she would have been right. I would have gone, made small talk with her family, laughed at her brother-in-law's bad jokes, and smiled through the whole thing because that's what she expected me to do. But this time, I had other plans. I was in the middle of reading when she walked into the room, already dressed and putting on her earrings. "You ready?" she asked, barely looking at me. I didn't even glance up from my book. "For what?" She let out a frustrated sigh. "For my sister's barbecue. I told you about it last month." I turned a page. "Yeah, but you never asked if I wanted to go." The room went dead silent. I could feel her staring at me, but I kept reading, acting as if her reaction didn't affect me. "Are you serious?" she finally said. I set my book down, looking up at her. "Yeah, I already made plans." Her mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to argue but didn't know where to start. "You always come with me," she said after a moment. "Not anymore," I said simply. I realized something. I don't actually enjoy these gatherings. I go because you expect me to, but I never really want to. And I think it's time I stopped doing things just because I feel obligated. Her jaw tightened. "So you're just gonna do whatever you want now?" I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. "Yeah, Lorraine. I think I am." That was the moment I saw it, the first real crack in her confidence. She had spent years believing that I would always be there, that no matter how much effort she stopped putting in, I would keep carrying the weight of our relationship. But now, she wasn't so sure. And the best part? I wasn't doing this to make her jealous. I wasn't trying to play mind games or manipulate her into caring. I had genuinely stopped trying to please a woman who didn't appreciate it. And the moment she realized that, she panicked. But instead of apologizing, instead of acknowledging what she had done, she did what she always did. She tried to flip it back on me. "Fine," she said sharply, grabbing her purse. "Do whatever you want." And then she stormed out the door. I didn't chase after her. I didn't call or text to ask if she was okay. I just picked up my book, leaned back, and kept reading. Because for the first time in a long time, I was okay. And I had a feeling this was only the beginning of Lorraine realizing just how much she had taken me for granted. I expected her to come home angry that night. Maybe even throw a few passive-aggressive comments my way, making it clear how much I had embarrassed her by not showing up to her sister's barbecue. But when she walked through the front door, she was quiet. Too quiet. She placed her purse on the counter, took off her shoes, and went straight to the bedroom without a word. I heard the sound of drawers opening, the rustle of fabric as she changed, then silence. I stayed where I was, sitting in the living room with my book in my hands, pretending I hadn't just spent the past hour wondering what was going through her head. Then, finally, she spoke. "You didn't even call to check on me," she said from the hallway, her voice calm, but laced with something underneath it. I turned a page. "Why would I?" She stepped closer, crossing her arms. "Because that's what you do when you care about someone." I let out a slow breath, setting my book down. "You mean like how you check on me? Like how you make sure I'm okay?" She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. For years, she had been the one receiving my attention, my care, my effort. And now that the dynamic had shifted, she was realizing something she had never considered before, what it felt like to be the one left in the dark. "I didn't mean it like that," she finally muttered, looking away. "Then how did you mean it, Lorraine?" I asked, my voice steady. She pressed her lips together, arms tightening around herself. "I just thought you'd at least ask if I had a good time." I studied her, the way she fidgeted under my gaze. She was uncomfortable. Not because I had done something cruel. Not because I had hurt her. But because, for the first time, she wasn't in control. "You're right," I said, standing up. "So, did you have a good time?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What?" I shrugged. "I'm asking. Did you have fun at the barbecue?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Then, finally, she sighed. "It was fine." "Liar," I said simply, walking past her toward the kitchen. Her head snapped toward me. "Excuse me." I grabbed a glass from the cupboard, filling it with water before turning back to her. "You're lying. If it was fine, you wouldn't be standing here trying to pick a fight with me. You'd be happy, relaxed. But you're not." She swallowed, her throat bobbing. She trailed off, looking at the floor. "I don't get why you're acting like this." "Like what?" I asked, leaning against the counter. Like you don't care anymore." I took a sip of water, letting the moment stretch. Then I looked her dead in the eyes. "I think the real question is, why do you care now?" Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. And for the first time in a long time, I saw something in her expression I hadn't seen before. Uncertainty. For years, she had been the one holding all the cards. I had spent so much time proving my worth, showing her how much I cared, making sure she felt loved and appreciated. But what had she done for me? What effort had she put in? What had she ever done to make me feel like I mattered? She had been comfortable knowing I would always be there, always trying, always making her happiness my priority. And now? Now she wasn't so sure anymore. I pushed off the counter, walking past her. "I'm gonna head to bed," I said casually. She didn't follow me right away. I heard her linger in the kitchen for a while, probably trying to process what had just happened, and I could almost feel the panic setting in. The next few days were interesting. Lorraine started acting differently. She didn't say much at first, but I could see it in the little things, the way she started paying attention to me in ways she hadn't before. One night, she cooked dinner without me asking. I came home to find the table set, a meal waiting for me, and her watching me carefully as I walked in. "I figured you'd be hungry," she said, forcing a small smile. I sat down, nodding. "Thanks." She watched me eat, as if waiting for me to react, to say something more. But I didn't. I simply ate, enjoyed my meal, and when I was done, I thanked her again and left the table. Another night, she asked if I wanted to watch a movie. "It's that one you mentioned a while back," she said, holding up the remote. That was new. Lorraine never remembered things like that. "Maybe later," I said, grabbing a book instead. She didn't push, but I could see the way her fingers clenched the remote, the frustration building. And that's when I knew I was in her head now. For so long, I had been the one chasing her, trying to earn her affection, her attention, her effort. Now, she was the one chasing me. The breaking point. It was on the fourth night that it finally happened. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when Lorraine walked in and stood in front of me. Not beside me, not across the room, directly in front of me. I raised an eyebrow. Something wrong. She let out a shaky breath. "I don't like this." "Like what?" "This. Whatever this is." She motioned between us. "You're different. Distant. And I don't know what I did to make you act this way." I tilted my head, studying her. "You really don't know?" She swallowed. "No." I let out a breath, leaning forward. "You told me, to my face, that you don't have to make me happy. Remember that?" Her eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected me to throw her own words back at her. "You said it like it was nothing," I continued. "Like it wasn't worth a second thought." And for a long time, I believed you. I believed that my happiness didn't matter in this marriage. That my only job was to keep you happy, no matter how little I got in return. Liam, that's not. But then I asked myself, I cut her off, my voice firm. What if I stopped? She inhaled sharply, her body going stiff. What if I stopped making you my priority? I continued. What if I stopped bending over backward for someone who wouldn't do the same for me? What if I finally put myself first? Her breath hitched. I didn't mean it like that. But you said it, I said, standing up. And maybe, just maybe, I finally started listening. She looked up at me, her face pale, her hands slightly trembling. For the first time in our marriage, I could see it. She was afraid. Not of losing me, but of losing the version of me who had always put her first. And that's when I realized she had taken me for granted for so long. She never thought this day would come. She never thought I'd stop trying. But I had. And I wasn't going back. Lorraine didn't know how to handle it. I can see it in the way she moved, how her usual confidence had been replaced by something hesitant, uncertain. She wasn't used to being the one who felt off balance. For years, I had been predictable, steady, the foundation she could rely on without having to give much in return. But now that foundation was shifting beneath her feet, and she was scrambling to hold on. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't mean. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was simply done. Done playing the role of the devoted husband who always had to prove his worth. Done waiting for her to care about me the way I had cared about her. Done pretending that everything was okay when, deep down, I had known for a long time that it wasn't. And Lorraine? She had no idea how to deal with it. She started trying harder in small ways at first. Little gestures she thought would go unnoticed. She'd wake up earlier than usual, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, waiting for me instead of staying in bed like she used to. She'd ask what time I'd be home from work, something she never bothered with before. She even started dressing a little nicer around the house, as if she suddenly cared what I thought. But I saw through it. She wasn't doing these things because she missed me. She was doing them because she missed the version of me who had always been at her beck and call. And I had no interest in playing that role anymore. One evening, I was in the garage working on my car when she came out, leaning against the doorway like she used to when we were first married. Back when things were different. Back when I still believed we were a team. How's it going? She asked, her voice softer than usual. I wiped my hands on a rag, glancing up at her. Fine. She shifted, playing with the hem of her sweater. You've been out here a lot lately. I nodded. Yeah. Silence. I could feel her watching me, waiting for me to invite her in, to make room for her in my world again. But I didn't. I just kept working, letting her stand there in the awkwardness she had created. Finally, she sighed. Do you even want to be around me anymore? I paused, setting down my tools. Then I turned to face her, meeting her gaze. Do you want the truth? She swallowed. Yeah. I took a deep breath. I don't know. Her face crumpled for just a second before she smoothed it over, masking her emotions like she always did. I don't understand, she said, shaking her head. One day you were fine, and the next, it's like you don't even want to try. That made me laugh, a hollow sound that echoed through the garage. One day, I repeated, running a hand through my hair. Lorraine, this didn't happen overnight. It took years. Years of me trying and you not noticing. Years of putting you first while you treated me like an afterthought. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't finished. You think I woke up one morning and decided to stop caring? No. I spent a long time convincing myself that if I just did more, if I just loved you enough, maybe one day you'd look at me the way I looked at you. But you didn't. And eventually, I realized. You never would. Her breathing was shaky now, her hands gripping the edges of her sweater like she was trying to keep herself together. That's not fair. I exhaled, shaking my head. You're right. It's not. But neither was the way you treated me. More silence. She wiped at her eyes quickly, as if she didn't want me to see the cracks forming in her carefully maintained composure. So what now? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stared at her for a long moment, taking in the woman I had once thought I'd spend forever with. And I told her the truth. I don't know. The final shift. After that conversation, something changed between us. Lorraine wasn't just uncomfortable anymore, she was scared. Not of me. Not of anything I would do. But of something much worse. She was scared of losing the version of me she had always relied on. She started trying harder. She made dinner without me asking. She left little notes on the counter, things she hadn't done in years. She even suggested we go out together, just the two of us. But it was too late. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I just didn't care. And when a man stops caring, that's when things really fall apart. I didn't realize how much space I had taken up in Lorraine's life until I stepped back and watched her struggle to fill it. She had always been so sure of herself, so confident in her place in our marriage. And why wouldn't she be? I had made it easy for her. I had been the one to reach first, to make sure everything ran smoothly, to pick up the slack where she left gaps without her even noticing. But now? Now those gaps were glaring, and she was floundering to bridge them. She started paying attention to things she never had before. Not out of care, but out of necessity. She noticed when we were out of groceries, something I had always taken care of without a second thought. She noticed when the house was a little colder because I had stopped adjusting the thermostat for her comfort. She noticed when I made dinner for myself without asking if she wanted anything. And, more importantly, she noticed when I stopped waiting for her. For years, I had been an afterthought to her schedule. She made plans without asking me, committed to events assuming I would be there, left me in the background while she lived in the center of her own world. But when I stopped bending to fit into it, when I started making my own choices, she panicked. One night, she came home from work to find me getting ready to go out. Nothing elaborate, just jeans, a fresh shirt, and cologne. Something I hadn't bothered with in years, not unless it was for an event she had planned. She lingered in the doorway, watching me. "Where are you going?" I adjusted my cuff, not looking up. "Out." "With who?" I smirked, finally meeting her eyes. "Does it matter?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned against the frame, crossing her arms. I didn't think you had plans tonight." I shrugged. "Well, I do." She hesitated, something passing over her face, something like disbelief. Lorraine had never considered the possibility that I might have a life outside of her, outside of this house. For years, I had made her my priority, the center of my world. But the moment she realized that she wasn't at the center anymore, it threw her completely off balance. "Are you seeing someone?" She blurted out suddenly, her voice sharp. I raised a brow. "No." Her shoulders relaxed just a fraction. "Then what if?" "But if I was," I cut her off. "Would it really matter to you?" She inhaled sharply, taken aback. "Of course it would." I laughed, shaking my head. "Would it?" "Because I've spent years watching you look right through me like I wasn't even there. But now that I'm actually living my life instead of waiting for your scraps, now you care." She clenched her jaw. "That's not fair." I stepped closer, watching her carefully. "No, Lorraine. You weren't fair. You took and took and took, and when I finally stopped giving, you suddenly realized how much you needed me. But not because you love me." I paused, letting the words sink in. "Because you missed the convenience of me." She blinked rapidly, as if my words had hit harder than she wanted to admit. But she still didn't apologize. She still didn't say I love you. She just stood there, staring at me, waiting for me to give her an opening, to reassure her that everything would go back to normal. I didn't. Instead, I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, leaving her standing there with nothing but the mess she had created. The final realization. For the next few days, Lorraine tried harder. Harder than she ever had before. She made an effort to ask about my day. She cooked meals she knew I liked. She even suggested we go on a weekend trip together, something she had never bothered with before unless it was for her own enjoyment. But none of it felt real. It wasn't love. It was damage control. She wasn't trying to fix our marriage because she had suddenly realized how much she loved me. She was trying to fix it because she had finally noticed the cracks and was afraid of what would happen if I walked away completely. And that's when it hit me. I had spent so many years trying to earn her love, trying to prove my worth to a woman who had never truly valued me. And now that I was slipping away, she wasn't mourning me. She was mourning the version of me who would have fought for her. But that version of me was gone. I didn't hate her. I didn't even resent her anymore. I just didn't care. And when a man stops caring, when he truly lets go, that's when the relationship is really over. And I think Lorraine finally realized that, too. The moment of truth came on a quiet evening, one that felt no different from any other. Lorraine and I sat across from each other at the dinner table, the candle she had lit flickering between us, casting shadows that danced across her face. She had made an effort tonight, cooked my favorite meal, set the table nicely, even wore the perfume she used to wear when we were first dating. But there was something hollow about it. She wasn't doing this out of love. She was doing it out of fear. And that was the problem. I took a bite of my food, chewed slowly, and set my fork down. Lorraine was watching me, waiting, hoping for some kind of sign that things were going back to normal, that all of her sudden effort was working. But it wasn't, because I wasn't the same man I had been before. I think we both know where this is going, I said, my voice steady calm. She flinched slightly, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wine glass. What do you mean? I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. I think we've been done for a long time, Lorraine. We just didn't want to admit it. Her breath hitched. She shook her head. No, we can fix this. I know I've been distant, and I know It's not about fixing things, I interrupted gently. It's about realizing that we were never supposed to be like this. We weren't a partnership. We were a habit. She looked away, her eyes shining, but she didn't deny it. And that was all the confirmation I needed. I don't hate you, I continued. I'm not even angry anymore. I just don't think we should keep pretending that this is something worth holding on to. Her lower lip trembled, but she swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay composed. You don't love me anymore? I sighed. I loved you for a long time, even when you didn't see it, even when you took it for granted. But love isn't supposed to feel like this. She wiped at her face quickly, inhaling sharply. I don't want to lose you. I studied her carefully. Then why did it take me walking away for you to finally say that? She had no answer, and I knew then, without a doubt, that this was the right decision. I stood up, taking my plate to the sink, rinsing it off. She remained seated, staring down at her untouched food, lost in her own thoughts. I walked back toward her, resting a hand on the back of her chair for just a moment. We'll be okay, I said softly. Both of us. She didn't move, didn't speak. And for the first time in our entire marriage, I walked away without looking back. The life that waited for me, the months that followed were peaceful. The divorce wasn't dramatic. We didn't have screaming matches or fights over assets. It was quiet, like two people finally releasing the weight they had been carrying for too long. Lorraine tried, for a while, to change my mind. But I think deep down, she knew it was useless. And me? For the first time in years, I felt free. I traveled. Took a new job offer in a city I had always wanted to live in, but never could because it wasn't convenient for our marriage. I started playing guitar again, something I had given up because Lorraine had never really cared for music. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, built a life that was mine. And the best part? I stopped feeling like I had to prove my worth to anyone. One day, months after the divorce was finalized, I got a message from Lorraine. I hope you're happy. And for the first time in a long time, I could say with complete honesty, I was.